The suitcase landed on the stone porch with a heavy thud that echoed through the quiet neighborhood. Rebecca Morgan stood frozen in front of the house she had dreamed about for 16 long years. The Nevada sun was beginning to set over Summerlin, painting the sky with shades of orange and crimson. Palm trees rustled softly in the warm desert breeze. The fountain she had paid to install still trickled peacefully beside the walkway. The desert roses she had ordered years ago were now fully grown. Everything looked exactly as she remembered. Everything. Except the front door. Rebecca slowly reached into her purse and pulled out a worn brass key attached to a faded leather keychain. She had carried that key everywhere, through 16 years of double shifts, sleepless nights, cheap apartments, and lonely holidays. It had always reminded her why she kept going. Home. She slipped the key into the lock. It wouldn't fit. She frowned and tried again. Nothing. Her heartbeat quickened. Someone had replaced the lock. Before she could think any further, footsteps echoed inside. The electronic deadbolt clicked. The door slowly opened. Standing in front of her was a woman she had never seen before. She looked to be in her early 30s, dressed comfortably in leggings and an oversized sweatshirt, holding a steaming mug of coffee in one hand as if she'd lived there forever. She looked Rebecca up and down with polite confusion. "Can I help you?" Rebecca couldn't answer for several seconds. Instead, her eyes wandered inside. The family portraits were gone. The antique hallway table she'd spent weeks choosing had disappeared. Different curtains. Different furniture. Different memories. Finally she forced herself to speak. "I'm looking for Scott Morgan." The stranger frowned slightly. "Scott?" She glanced over her shoulder. "Babe. Someone's here asking for you." Rebecca felt her stomach tighten. "Babe?" Heavy footsteps approached. A familiar figure appeared in the hallway. Scott Morgan. Older. Gray streaks framed his temples. His face carried deeper lines than she remembered. But his eyes. The moment they met hers, every bit of color drained from his face. For several seconds neither of them moved. Neither of them breathed. Finally, Scott whispered. "Rebecca?" His voice sounded as though he'd just seen a ghost. Rebecca forced a small smile. "Hi. I figured I'd surprise everyone." Scott swallowed hard. I thought you weren't coming back until Christmas. I changed my flight. I wanted to finally come home." Silence swallowed the porch. Rebecca slowly turned toward the younger woman. She looked back at Scott. "So. I guess I'm the one who got surprised." The woman shifted uncomfortably. "I'll give you two a minute." She quietly stepped back inside. Scott walked onto the porch and gently closed the door behind him. "Rebecca, please. Let's not do this out here. Come inside and we'll talk." Rebecca let out a quiet laugh. Not because anything was funny. Because if she didn't laugh, she would fall apart. "Inside?" She looked at the house. "The house I spent 16 years paying for." Scott rubbed both hands over his face. "It isn't what it looks like." "Really?" She folded her arms. "Then tell me what exactly it looks like." Scott couldn't answer. "You were gone for a long time." Rebecca stared at him in disbelief. "I was gone because someone had to make the mortgage payments." Silence. "I cleaned luxury hotel rooms. I worked overnight shifts. I cared for elderly people during the day. I missed birthdays. I missed anniversaries. I missed Christmas. I skipped vacations. I sent nearly every paycheck back home. I believed we were building a future together." Scott lowered his eyes. "I never wanted this to happen. But it did." Rebecca picked up her suitcase. "I won't interrupt your new life." "Rebecca, wait. I've already waited 16 years." Without looking back, she walked toward the sidewalk. Scott called after her several times. She never turned around. Las Vegas felt strangely unfamiliar. The casinos sparkled beneath the evening lights. Tourists filled the sidewalks. Street performers entertained crowds. Music poured from rooftop lounges. People laughed. Celebrated. Won fortunes. Lost fortunes. Life continued exactly as it always had. Only Rebecca felt completely alone. She checked into a quiet boutique hotel several miles away from the strip. Nothing fancy. Just somewhere to disappear for a few days. The room overlooked a parking garage. Perfect. She wasn't looking for beautiful scenery. She simply needed 4 walls where no one expected anything from her. She placed her suitcase beside the bed and slowly sat down. The silence felt unbearable. For 16 years she had imagined this day. She pictured family dinners. Grandchildren. Lazy Sunday mornings. Coffee on her own back porch. Instead, she had become a stranger standing outside her own home. There was only one thing left to do. Call her children. Ashley had recently turned 26. She owned a successful beauty salon in Henderson. Rebecca smiled despite everything. Surely her daughter would be excited. She dialed the number. The phone rang. Once. Twice. 3 times. Finally. "Hi, Mom." Ashley's voice sounded rushed. "Everything okay?" Rebecca smiled. "I've got some wonderful news. I'm home. I came back for good." Silence. Long enough to make Rebecca check whether the call had disconnected. Finally Ashley sighed. "Already? I thought you weren't coming until December. I wanted to surprise everyone." Another pause. "Mom. I'm really busy today. My schedule is completely packed. I've got clients waiting." Rebecca forced herself to stay cheerful. "I could drive to Henderson. We could grab dinner after work." Ashley hesitated. "Maybe this weekend?" "I honestly can't today. I'm sorry. I really have to go." The line went dead. Rebecca slowly lowered the phone. 3 years. She hadn't hugged her daughter in 3 years. Their reunion had lasted less than 2 minutes. For the first time that day, finding another woman in her house no longer felt like the most painful part. The realization that her own daughter had no time to see her hurt even more. She stared silently at her phone. Then opened her contacts once again. One name remained. Tyler. Her son. She whispered a quiet prayer before pressing the call button. Rebecca took a slow, shaky breath before pressing Tyler's name. Unlike Ashley, he answered almost immediately. "Hey, Mom." His voice was loud, competing with the sounds of impact wrenches and air compressors. "You okay?" "I'm at the shop." Rebecca smiled faintly. "I'm back. I'm in Las Vegas. I was hoping maybe we could have dinner tonight." There was a brief pause. "You're already here? I thought you weren't flying in for another couple of months." "I changed my plans. I wanted to surprise everyone." Tyler chuckled awkwardly. "Well, that's definitely a surprise." Rebecca waited. "So, are you free tonight?" Another silence. "I wish I could. My father-in-law's birthday is tonight. Megan's whole family is getting together. I really can't skip it." Rebecca closed her eyes. "Tomorrow? I could stop by the garage. Maybe after lunch." "Yeah, tomorrow should work." Then Tyler asked the question she hadn't expected. "Wait. If you're back, why are you calling from a hotel?" Rebecca looked toward the window. The concrete parking garage reflected the evening sunlight. "I couldn't stay at the house." "What do you mean?" "Scott has someone else living there." Silence. A long silence. "So. You knew?" Tyler exhaled slowly. "Yeah." Rebecca felt something inside her quietly crack. "You knew?" "Mom. I didn't know how to tell you. It wasn't my place." Rebecca laughed softly. Not your place? You watched another woman move into the house your mother spent 16 years paying for. And you decided it wasn't your place? Tyler didn't answer. Finally he said quietly. It's complicated. No. Rebecca replied. It really isn't. Another long silence settled between them. Tyler changed the subject. So. You still brought the money? Rebecca frowned. What money? For the lift. The new hydraulic lift for my garage. You said last month you'd help me buy one. Rebecca didn't respond immediately. She remembered the conversation perfectly. Tyler had called her while she was polishing marble floors inside a luxury casino. He'd spent 20 minutes explaining how the new equipment would double his income. She had promised she'd help. At the time, she still believed she had a home waiting for her. Now everything was different. I have the money. She answered honestly. But it's no longer for a garage. Tyler sounded confused. What do you mean? I'm staying in Nevada. For good. I'm going to build my own home. My savings are going toward that. Silence. What? But. You promised. I promised to help while you were getting started. Rebecca spoke calmly. You're 27. You have a good career. A wife. A family. You can build your future the same way I built mine. Tyler's tone hardened. So that's it? You come back from 16 years in Vegas. And suddenly you're done helping everyone? Rebecca looked around the tiny hotel room. I've spent 16 years helping everyone. I've just never helped myself. Tyler sighed heavily. You don't understand. We've got bills. Megan's pregnant. We need that equipment. Rebecca's heart skipped. Pregnant? She smiled without realizing it. I'm going to be a grandmother. Tyler hesitated. Yeah. Rebecca sat down slowly. A grandson or granddaughter. A dream she'd imagined for years. Yet no one had even thought to tell her. When were you planning on telling me? I don't know. We were busy. Busy. That single word hurt more than she expected. Busy getting married. Busy buying a house. Busy starting a family. Busy living a life that no longer included her. Rebecca forced a smile. I'm happy for you. I truly am. Thank you. Tyler hesitated again. So. About the money. Rebecca interrupted him gently. No. Silence. I'm sorry. I said no. The money is staying with me. I'm finally going to build something that belongs to me. Tyler's voice rose immediately. So we're just supposed to figure everything out ourselves? Rebecca looked toward the fading sunset outside. That's what adults do. Another long silence. Finally Tyler muttered. I never thought you'd become this selfish. The words hit harder than anything Scott had said. Selfish. After 16 years of sacrificing everything. Rebecca swallowed the lump in her throat. I hope one day you understand. Before Tyler could answer, she ended the call. The room became painfully quiet. She sat motionless on the edge of the bed. 16 years. Hundreds of thousands of dollars. Countless overtime shifts. Every holiday spent working instead of celebrating. Every birthday missed. Every family photo she existed in only through video calls. She had convinced herself she was making a sacrifice for the people she loved. Now she realized something terrifying. They had slowly stopped seeing her as their mother. She had become a solution. A paycheck. A safety net. Someone they called whenever life became expensive. Nothing more. Tears finally began rolling down her cheeks. Not loud sobs. Just silent tears falling onto hands that had spent 16 years cleaning hotel rooms for strangers while dreaming of a family that no longer existed. Hours passed before she finally stood. She walked to the bathroom, splashed cold water on her face, and stared at her reflection. The woman looking back at her seemed older than 53. Tired. Exhausted. Broken. But somewhere behind those tired eyes, something else was beginning to appear. Resolve. If she truly had nowhere left to belong, then maybe it was finally time to build a place that belonged only to her. The next morning, Rebecca woke before sunrise. She reached into her folder and pulled out a set of documents she'd almost forgotten about. A few years earlier, she'd quietly purchased 5 acres of land outside Pahrump, thinking one day her entire family would gather there for holidays, birthdays, and summer barbecues. Now, that dream looked very different. She folded the papers carefully, grabbed her car keys, and headed toward the desert. She had no idea that one unexpected conversation later that morning would begin changing her life forever. By the time Rebecca reached Pahrump, the desert sun had already climbed high above the mountains. The drive from Las Vegas felt strangely peaceful. For the first time in years, nobody was calling her about bills, repairs, tuition payments, or emergency expenses. The only sound was the hum of the car and the endless Nevada desert stretching out around her. She turned onto a dusty road and stopped in front of her property. The 5-acre lot looked abandoned. Dry weeds swayed in the wind. Sagebrush covered most of the ground. A few rusted fence posts leaned at odd angles near the road. Rebecca stepped out of the car and stared at the land. This was supposed to be the place where her grandchildren would run through the yard, where family would gather for Thanksgiving, where Scott would grill steaks while Ashley set the table and Tyler played football with his kids. Now it was just empty desert. And somehow, that made it easier to breathe. As she walked farther onto the property, she heard the sound of a power saw nearby. On the neighboring lot, a tall man in a work shirt and baseball cap was building a wooden fence. He looked up when he noticed her. After a moment, he turned off the saw and walked over. "Morning," he called out. "You looking for someone?" "No," Rebecca replied. "This is my land." The man raised his eyebrows. "Well, that's good news. I was beginning to think nobody owned this place anymore." He extended a hand. "Cole Bennett." His grip was firm and rough from years of construction work. "Rebecca Morgan." Cole glanced around the property. "Planning to build?" Rebecca hesitated. "I think so." "Then you've got some work ahead of you." He pointed toward a cluster of overgrown bushes. "You'll need to clear all that before you can pour a foundation. And if you want water connected, the county paperwork takes forever." Rebecca sighed. "Sounds expensive." "Everything is expensive." Cole gave a small smile. "But it gets cheaper if you know the right people." For the next 20 minutes, he walked the property with her, pointing out where drainage would be best, where the afternoon sun hit hardest, and where a driveway should go. Unlike everyone she'd spoken to since returning home, he didn't ask how much money she had. He didn't ask what she could give him. He simply talked about the land. When they reached the far corner of the lot, Cole stopped. "If it were mine," he said, "I'd put the house right here." "Why?" "Morning light from the east. Mountains in the distance. And enough space for a garden." Rebecca looked out across the desert. For the first time since arriving in Las Vegas, she could actually picture something new instead of mourning what she'd lost. "You sound like you've done this before." Cole chuckled. "Twice." "Twice?" "First house burned down during a wildfire when I was 29. Second one got split in a divorce." Rebecca turned toward him. "I'm sorry." "Don't be." He shrugged. "Life happens." There was no bitterness in his voice. Just tired acceptance. "My ex-wife moved to California with someone else," he added. "Took half the furniture and all the houseplants." Rebecca surprised herself by laughing. The houseplants? Apparently those were the valuable assets. For a brief moment, the heaviness inside her chest eased. Cole looked at her more carefully. "You don't have to tell me your business," he said, "but people usually don't stand in the middle of an empty desert looking that miserable unless something happened." Rebecca stared out at the mountains. I came home yesterday and found another woman living in my house. Cole was silent. My husband changed the locks. Damn. My daughter was too busy to see me. My son asked if I brought money for his garage before he asked if I was okay. The words came out before she could stop them. Cole didn't interrupt. When she finished, he simply nodded. Then maybe this land showed up at exactly the right time. Rebecca looked at him. What do you mean? A house built after a storm is usually stronger than the one that existed before it. The sentence stayed with her. They stood quietly for a moment, listening to the desert wind. Finally Cole pulled a business card from his pocket. If you decide to build, call me. I do residential construction. And I know a guy with a bulldozer who owes me a favor. Rebecca took the card. Thanks. No problem. He started walking back toward his fence, then paused. One more thing. Yeah? Don't let anyone convince you that starting over at 53 is too late. Rebecca watched him return to work. The sound of the saw started up again. She looked down at the business card in her hand. Then she looked across the empty desert lot. For the first time since stepping off the plane in Las Vegas, she felt something she hadn't felt in a very long time. Possibility. What she didn't know was that before the week was over, Scott would show up asking for a favor that would push every ounce of her newfound strength to the limit. Rebecca drove back to Las Vegas with the windows down, letting the warm desert air fill the silence. Cole's words echoed in her mind. A house built after a storm is usually stronger than the one that existed before it. For the first time in years, someone had spoken to her without asking for money. Without expecting anything. Just simple advice. She hadn't realized how rare that had become. The following morning, Rebecca was waiting outside the Clark County Planning Department before the doors even opened. She spent nearly 4 hours moving from one office to another. Building permits. Zoning requirements. Utility applications. Survey records. By lunchtime, she carried a folder thick enough to start a small business. It was exhausting. But every signature felt different. Every document belonged to her. Not Scott. Not the children. Her. Leaving the county office, she stopped at a small diner for lunch. She had barely taken her first bite when her phone vibrated. Tyler calling. Rebecca hesitated before answering. Hi. Mom. His voice sounded calmer than the day before. Can we meet? Sure. I'm at Miller's Diner on Charleston. I'll be there in 20 minutes. Tyler arrived almost half an hour later. He looked tired. Grease stains covered his work shirt. Dark circles rested beneath his eyes. He hugged her awkwardly before sitting down. Neither of them spoke for several moments. Finally Tyler broke the silence. I shouldn't have called you selfish. Rebecca simply stirred her coffee. You were angry. I was. He rubbed the back of his neck. But, things have been stressful. Megan's pregnancy. The shop. Bills. I know. Rebecca answered quietly. The waitress brought another cup of coffee. Tyler thanked her before looking back at his mother. I really am happy you're home. Rebecca smiled sadly. I wish it had felt that way. He lowered his eyes. I'm sorry. For a moment, Rebecca saw the little boy who used to run into her arms whenever she came home for Christmas. Then he looked up again. So. There is something else. Of course there is. She thought. He pulled out his phone and showed her several photos. An old repair shop. A larger building. Professional lifts. New equipment. I found a place. If I can buy it now, I'll double my income. Rebecca looked through the pictures. It's nice. It is. He smiled. But I need about $70,000 for the down payment. There it was. The real reason for the meeting. Rebecca slowly placed the phone back on the table. I'm not giving you the money. Tyler's smile disappeared. You didn't even think about it. I've thought about it for 16 years. His jaw tightened. You've changed. Rebecca nodded. Yes. I finally have. You have enough money. So why not help your own son? She looked directly into his eyes. Because every time we've spoken since I landed, you've asked me for money. Tyler opened his mouth. Closed it again. She continued. You never asked where I slept. You never asked how I felt after finding another woman in my house. You never asked whether I cried. You never asked if I needed anything. You asked about a hydraulic lift. The words hit harder than she expected. Tyler stared silently at the table. Rebecca leaned back in her chair. I spent 16 years believing I was giving my children opportunities. I didn't realize I was teaching them that I would always solve every financial problem. Tyler finally looked at her. I never wanted you to feel like an ATM. Rebecca smiled sadly. But that's exactly what happened. Neither of them spoke. The silence between them was heavier than any argument. Finally Tyler sighed. I don't know how to fix this. Rebecca reached across the table and gently squeezed his hand. You don't fix it with money. You fix it with time. For once. I just want my son. Not another bill. Not another request. Just my son. Tyler nodded slowly. His eyes became glossy. I'll try. Rebecca believed him. At least she wanted to. That afternoon she drove back to Pahrump. Cole was exactly where she'd left him the day before. This time he was pouring concrete for fence posts. He noticed her truck and smiled. Well. I was wondering if you'd come back. Rebecca held up the folder of permits. I guess I'm officially building a house. Cole wiped sweat from his forehead. Congratulations. She laughed. I don't think anyone has ever congratulated me for spending a fortune. Oh. He grinned. Just wait until you buy lumber. They'll congratulate you every 5 minutes. Rebecca laughed harder than she had in months. It surprised both of them. Cole walked over. So. Where do you want to start? Rebecca looked across the empty property. She took a deep breath. From the beginning. Cole nodded. Good answer. He pulled a tape measure from his tool belt. Let's figure out where your front porch belongs. As they measured the property together, Rebecca realized something strange. For the first time since coming home. She wasn't thinking about Scott. Or Ashley. Or Tyler. She was thinking about tomorrow. She didn't notice the black pickup truck slowly pulling onto the dirt road until it stopped behind her SUV. When she turned around, her heart stopped. Scott climbed out of the truck. He wasn't alone. Nicole was sitting in the passenger seat. And judging by the look on Scott's face, he hadn't come to apologize. The black pickup rolled to a stop in a cloud of desert dust. Rebecca stood motionless. Scott stepped out first. Nicole climbed out a second later, shielding her eyes from the afternoon sun. Cole looked between the three of them. You know these people? Rebecca nodded without taking her eyes off Scott. Unfortunately. Scott walked forward slowly, stopping several feet away. I've been trying to reach you. Rebecca folded her arms. My phone works. You just stopped answering. I didn't think we had anything left to discuss. Scott glanced toward Cole before looking back at Rebecca. Can we talk privately? Cole immediately understood. I'll be over by my trailer. He tipped his cap toward Rebecca. If you need anything. She gave him a small nod. I'll be okay. Cole walked away but remained close enough to see the property. Scott waited until he was out of earshot. So. This is where you've been. Rebecca looked around her land. Yes. I bought it years ago. I remember. Scott sighed. You always wanted to build here after retirement. Rebecca looked at him calmly. I still do. For a few seconds neither of them spoke. Finally Scott cleared his throat. I owe you an apology. Rebecca didn't respond. I handled everything terribly. I should have told you about Nicole. I should have talked to you before changing the locks. You think? His shoulders slumped. I know. Nicole finally stepped forward. I never wanted to hurt you. Rebecca turned toward her. You didn't. Nicole looked confused. The person who made promises to me was standing beside you. Scott closed his eyes. Rebecca. No. She interrupted him. You don't get to make this about her. You made the choices. You lied. You let me work 16 years believing we still had a marriage. Scott's voice became barely audible. I didn't know how to tell you. Rebecca laughed bitterly. So instead, you let me fly across the country carrying presents for my family. You let me walk up to my own front door. You let another woman answer it. Scott had no answer. The silence said everything. After nearly a minute, he finally spoke again. There's another reason I came. Rebecca almost smiled. Of course there is. What is it? Scott looked embarrassed. The house. What about it? I need your signature. Rebecca frowned. My signature? The mortgage refinance. We refinanced 2 years ago. Her expression changed instantly. What? Scott quickly continued. The roof needed replacing. There were medical bills. Interest rates were low. So we refinanced. Rebecca stared at him. You refinanced our house. Without telling me? Scott hesitated. You signed the power of attorney before leaving. Rebecca's stomach dropped. She remembered. Nearly 10 years earlier, an attorney had suggested signing limited paperwork so Scott could handle documents while she worked in Las Vegas. She had trusted him completely. You used it. It was legal. Rebecca's voice turned cold. I didn't ask if it was legal. I asked if you used it. Scott nodded. Yes. How much? He looked at the ground. 380,000. Rebecca felt dizzy. How much is still owed? 320. She couldn't believe what she was hearing. The house she'd almost finished paying off was drowning in debt again. Scott spoke quickly. The payments have gotten too high. I'm behind. The bank says they may start foreclosure. Rebecca stared at him. So that's why you're here. He didn't answer. You need me. Scott finally nodded. If you sign one more refinance, we can lower the payments. Rebecca let out a slow breath. Everything suddenly made sense. The panic in his voice. The unexpected apology. The visit to her property. It had never been about saving their marriage. It was about saving the house. The same house he had already replaced her in. Rebecca looked him directly in the eyes. No. Scott blinked. What? I said no. You don't understand. No. Rebecca replied calmly. I finally do. If I sign, I'm responsible for another loan. If you stop paying, the bank comes after me. Scott stepped closer. I'd never let that happen. Rebecca looked at him with quiet disbelief. You already did. Nicole lowered her head. Scott became desperate. Please. We could lose everything. Rebecca slowly looked toward the house plans lying on the hood of her SUV. Then back at Scott. I already lost everything. You lost a house. I lost 16 years. Scott ran both hands through his hair. So you're just going to let us fail? Rebecca answered without hesitation. You made your choices. Now you live with them. His face hardened. I knew this guy was filling your head. He pointed toward Cole's trailer. You've known him for 2 days. Rebecca's eyes narrowed. This has nothing to do with Cole. It has everything to do with me finally opening my eyes. Scott laughed sarcastically. So that's it? You meet some contractor. And suddenly you're a different person. No. Rebecca answered quietly. I became a different person the moment another woman opened my front door. Scott had nothing left to say. For several long seconds the only sound was the desert wind. Finally Nicole walked over to Rebecca. I'm truly sorry. Rebecca studied her face. She looked sincere. Exhausted. Uncomfortable. Ashamed. Rebecca nodded once. I hope you never know what this feels like. Nicole's eyes filled with tears. She quietly returned to the truck. Scott lingered a moment longer. If you change your mind. I won't. He stood there as though hoping she would stop him. She didn't. Eventually he climbed back into the pickup. Rebecca watched the truck disappear down the dirt road until it became nothing more than a cloud of dust on the horizon. Only then did she notice Cole walking toward her. He didn't ask what had happened. Instead, he handed her a bottle of cold water. You look like you could use this. Rebecca accepted it with a grateful smile. Thank you. Cole looked toward the empty road. My grandfather used to say something. What was that? The people who only visit when they need something usually aren't coming to see you. Rebecca looked down at the bottle in her hands. Then she smiled for the first time that day. You know. I think your grandfather was a very smart man. Cole grinned. He also wrestled rattlesnakes after drinking whiskey. Rebecca laughed. So, maybe don't follow all of his advice. For the first time in years, Rebecca's laughter sounded genuine. Neither of them noticed that someone had been watching the entire conversation from the road. Inside a parked SUV, Ashley slowly lowered her phone. She had heard enough to realize that the story her father had been telling the family for years wasn't the truth. Ashley sat behind the wheel of her SUV long after her father's pickup had disappeared down the dusty road. The engine was still running. The air conditioner hummed softly. But she barely noticed. Her phone rested in her lap. The screen was dark. Only minutes earlier, she'd been ready to call her father and ask why he looked so upset. Now, she wasn't sure she wanted to hear his version anymore. She had never intended to follow him. Earlier that afternoon, Scott had called her unexpectedly. His voice had sounded nervous. Ashley, I'm heading out to your mom's property. I think she's making a huge mistake. I could use some support. Ashley had agreed without asking many questions. She assumed her mother was being stubborn. She assumed her father was trying to fix things. Instead, she had listened from a distance as every lie slowly unraveled. The refinanced mortgage. The hidden debt. The power of attorney. The request for another signature. Her father hadn't come to apologize. He had come because he needed something. Ashley leaned back against the seat. A painful memory surfaced. She was 12 years old. Her mother had flown home for only 4 days that Christmas. Instead of buying herself new clothes, Rebecca had handed Ashley a wrapped box. Inside was the expensive guitar Ashley had begged for all year. She remembered asking, "What did you get for yourself?" Rebecca had smiled. "I already got the best gift. I get to spend Christmas with you." Ashley hadn't understood then. Now she did. Tears slowly filled her eyes. How many times had her mother chosen everyone else over herself? And what had they given her in return? A locked front door. Rebecca and Cole spent the rest of the afternoon marking the future foundation with wooden stakes and bright orange string. Standing in the middle of the outlined rectangle, Cole spread his arms. "So, welcome to your future living room." Rebecca smiled. "It doesn't look very impressive." "Neither does a newborn," Cole replied. "But give it time." She laughed. "You always have an answer. My dad used to say that if you can't fix a problem, at least make someone laugh." Did it work? Sometimes. He shrugged. The other times he bought pie. Rebecca smiled. I like your father already. You would've. There was a brief silence. He passed away 8 years ago. I'm sorry. So am I. Cole looked across the desert. He taught me that a house isn't measured by square footage. It's measured by how safe people feel walking through the front door. Rebecca quietly looked toward the mountains. Safe. She hadn't felt that word in years. Late that evening, Rebecca returned to the hotel. As she stepped out of the elevator, she noticed someone sitting in one of the lobby chairs. Ashley. She stood immediately. Mom. Rebecca stopped. For a second, neither of them knew what to say. Then Ashley crossed the room and hugged her. Not the polite hug she'd given during rushed holidays. A real hug. The kind Rebecca had dreamed about during lonely nights in Las Vegas. I'm sorry. Ashley whispered. Rebecca gently pulled back. What happened? Ashley wiped away tears. I followed Dad today. Rebecca looked surprised. I heard everything. The mortgage. The refinance. The power of attorney. I didn't know. Rebecca searched her daughter's face. Ashley looked devastated. I believed him. What do you mean? Ashley sat down slowly. Dad always told us you wanted to stay in Las Vegas. Rebecca frowned. He said every time he asked you to come home. You chose work. Rebecca felt as if the air had left the room. What? Ashley nodded. He told us you loved making money. He said you kept extending your contracts because you didn't want small-town family life anymore. Rebecca couldn't speak. Ashley continued. When I'd ask why you missed birthdays, he'd say, your mother has other priorities. When you missed Tyler's wedding rehearsal, he told us you accepted another overtime shift because the bonus mattered more. Rebecca covered her mouth. That's not true. I know. Ashley whispered. I know now. Fresh tears rolled down Rebecca's face. I begged for vacation. I was denied. I tried to switch shifts. I even offered to work Christmas for 3 straight years just so I could attend your wedding. Ashley stared at her. You did? Rebecca nodded. They wouldn't approve the leave. I cried for 2 days. Ashley buried her face in her hands. Oh my God. I'm so sorry. I believed him. Rebecca slowly reached across the table. You were a child. No. Ashley shook her head. I became an adult. And I never asked for your side. Those words hurt. But they also healed. For the first time since returning home, someone wanted to hear her truth. Ashley looked up again. Mom. Can you ever forgive me? Rebecca smiled through her tears. You're my daughter. There was never anything to forgive. Ashley hugged her again. This time they both cried. Not because everything was fixed. Because for the first time in years, they were finally grieving together instead of separately. The next morning, Rebecca's phone buzzed just after 8. It was Tyler. She almost let it ring. Instead, she answered. Good morning. His voice sounded different. Calmer. Can we meet? Rebecca hesitated. Why? Ashley called me last night. A long pause followed. Then Tyler quietly said. I think Dad lied to us our entire lives. Rebecca closed her eyes. The truth was finally beginning to reach her children. But she had no idea that before the day was over, Scott would make one last desperate move, one that would put the family in a situation none of them saw coming. Rebecca arrived at the small coffee shop in North Las Vegas 10 minutes early. She wasn't sure what to expect. The Tyler she'd spoken to 2 days ago had sounded defensive, almost angry. The man who had called that morning sounded like someone carrying a weight he could no longer ignore. She spotted him through the window before he saw her. He looked exhausted. His shoulders were slumped, and his eyes were fixed on the table in front of him. When Rebecca walked inside, he immediately stood. "Mom." She smiled softly. "Hi." He hesitated before wrapping his arms around her. It wasn't a long hug. But it was real. When they sat down, neither of them touched their coffee. Finally Tyler spoke. "Ashley told me everything." Rebecca remained quiet. "I didn't believe her at first. So I went to Dad." "And?" Tyler let out a long breath. "He admitted it." Rebecca lowered her eyes. "He said he never wanted us to hate him. So he let us believe it was easier if we blamed you." The words hung heavily between them. Tyler rubbed his forehead. "Do you know what the worst part is?" Rebecca shook her head. "I never questioned it. When you missed birthdays, I blamed you. When you couldn't come home, I blamed you. When you weren't at my graduation, I blamed you." His voice began to crack. "You were working overtime to pay for my college." Rebecca reached across the table and gently placed her hand over his. "You were young." "I wasn't young last year," he whispered. "I wasn't young when I asked you for money instead of asking how you were." Tears filled his eyes. "I became exactly what Dad taught us to become." Rebecca squeezed his hand. "No. You became someone who trusted his father. There's a difference." Tyler shook his head. "I don't deserve how kind you're being." Rebecca smiled sadly. "You don't stop loving your children because they make mistakes. You help them become better." He nodded silently. After a long pause he reached into his backpack and pulled out a large envelope. He slid it across the table. Rebecca looked at it. "What's this?" "Open it." Inside was a cashier's check. $18,500. Rebecca stared at it in disbelief. "What is this?" "My savings." "Tyler." He interrupted her. "It's not enough to build a house. But it's a start." Rebecca immediately pushed the envelope back. "No. I can't take this." "You can." He answered firmly. "I spent years asking you for help. It's my turn now." Rebecca smiled through tears. "You have a baby coming. We'll manage." He smiled for the first time that morning. "I already talked to Megan." Rebecca looked surprised. "You did?" He nodded. "She told me something I'll never forget." "What?" Tyler laughed quietly. "She said, your mother spent 16 years building everyone else's future. Maybe it's finally time someone helps build hers." Rebecca covered her mouth. Without realizing it, she began crying again. Not from pain. From relief. That afternoon Rebecca drove back to her property. Cole was unloading lumber from a trailer. When he saw Tyler climbing out of the passenger seat behind Rebecca, he smiled. "I guess we're having visitors." Rebecca introduced them. "Cole, this is my son, Tyler." The two men shook hands. Cole immediately noticed Tyler studying the building plans. "You work construction?" "No. Auto repair." Cole grinned. "Close enough." Tyler smiled politely. Then he looked around the property. "This is where you're really going to build?" Rebecca nodded. "I think so." Tyler stared at the desert for several seconds. Finally he said quietly, "I can help." Rebecca looked surprised. "You don't have to." "I know. I want to." Cole watched the exchange without saying a word. Then he reached into the truck bed and tossed Tyler a pair of work gloves. "You ever set fence posts?" Tyler caught them. "No." Cole smiled. "Good. I won't have to break any bad habits." Within minutes the three of them were measuring, digging, and marking the property. Rebecca found herself smiling more than working. Every time she looked up, Tyler was laughing at one of Cole's terrible jokes. It reminded her of the little boy who used to build forts in the backyard with scrap wood. For the first time in years. She could almost see her family beginning to heal. Late that afternoon another vehicle pulled onto the property. This time it was Ashley. She stepped out carrying 3 paper bags. I figured everyone would be hungry. Cole smiled. Now you're speaking my language. The 4 of them sat on folding chairs eating hamburgers while watching the sun slowly drift toward the mountains. Conversation came easily. No arguments. No accusations. No one asked Rebecca for money. They simply talked. About memories. About the house. About the baby Tyler and Megan were expecting. About what color Rebecca wanted her future front door. As the evening grew quieter, Ashley looked around. You know, I haven't seen Mom smile this much in years. Rebecca hadn't realized it until that moment. Ashley was right. She was smiling. Not because everything was perfect. But because hope had finally replaced regret. Back in Summerlin, Scott stood alone in the living room. The house felt strangely empty. Nicole quietly packed a suitcase upstairs. She had barely spoken since visiting Rebecca's property. Scott stared at an old family photograph resting in a drawer. Rebecca. Ashley. Tyler. Christmas. 15 years earlier. He slowly sat down. For the first time. He wasn't wondering how to save the house. He was wondering whether he had already lost the only people who had ever truly made it a home. But before he could even begin facing that truth, a loud knock echoed through the front door. When Scott opened it, a man in a dark suit handed him a thick envelope. You've been served. Scott looked down at the legal documents. His face turned completely white. Everything he had been hiding was finally catching up with him. Scott stood frozen in the doorway, staring at the thick envelope in his hands. The man in the dark suit had already turned and walked back toward his sedan. You've been served, he'd said. Nothing more. Scott slowly closed the front door. Nicole came downstairs carrying a half-packed suitcase. Who was that? Scott didn't answer. He tore open the envelope with trembling hands. The first page made his stomach drop. Notice of default. The bank had officially begun foreclosure proceedings. 3 missed mortgage payments. 30 days to bring the loan current. Failure to do so would begin the legal process to seize the property. Nicole quietly walked over. What happened? Scott handed her the papers. She read them silently. Then looked up. You told me you were only 1 payment behind. Scott rubbed his temples. I thought I could catch up. You said everything was under control. I thought it would be. Nicole placed the documents back on the table. No. You hoped Rebecca would sign. Scott didn't deny it. The silence answered for him. Nicole looked around the living room. The expensive furniture. The giant television. The remodeled kitchen. So, all of this was financed? Scott nodded. The kitchen. The roof. The pool. The truck. Nicole slowly backed away. You told me the house was almost paid off. It was. Scott whispered. I just kept thinking things would get better. Nicole stared at him in disbelief. Instead, they had only gotten worse. Meanwhile, 45 miles away, laughter echoed across Rebecca's property. Cole had somehow convinced Tyler that digging post holes by hand was great exercise. 10 minutes later Tyler was leaning on the shovel, completely exhausted. I think this shovel weighs more than my toolbox. Cole laughed. No. You're just discovering muscles you've never met before. Ashley couldn't stop laughing. Rebecca watched all 3 of them with quiet joy. It felt normal. Something she hadn't experienced in years. Around lunchtime, Megan arrived carrying a cooler full of sandwiches and lemonade. She walked directly toward Rebecca. Without saying a word, she hugged her. I've wanted to do that since yesterday. Rebecca smiled warmly. So have I. Megan stepped back. I owe you an apology. For what? I should have called. I should have visited. I let Tyler keep saying. We'll do it next week. Rebecca gently shook her head. Life gets busy. Megan smiled sadly. No. We made excuses. There's a difference. Rebecca squeezed her hand. I'm just happy you're here. Megan looked around the property. Then she placed Rebecca's hand against her stomach. The baby kicked. Rebecca's eyes widened. Oh. My goodness. Megan laughed. I think your grandbaby approves of this place. Tears immediately filled Rebecca's eyes. It was the first time she'd ever felt the baby move. For several long seconds she couldn't speak. All those years she'd dreamed about becoming a grandmother. She'd almost missed this moment entirely. Tyler quietly watched his mother smiling through tears. Ashley leaned closer and whispered. I've never seen her this happy. Tyler nodded. Neither have I. Later that afternoon, while everyone worked, Cole walked over carrying a rolled-up set of blueprints. I've been thinking. Rebecca smiled. That usually means expensive news. Sometimes. He laughed. But not today. He spread the plans across the hood of his truck. I took another look at your lot. Rebecca leaned closer. So? I think we can save you almost $40,000. Everyone stopped what they were doing. How? Cole pointed toward the drawings. If we rotate the house 15 degrees. We won't need as much excavation. We can also shorten the utility trench. And if we pour a monolithic slab instead of a raised foundation. You'll save even more. Rebecca stared at him. You did all this? Last night. When? I couldn't sleep. Ashley smiled knowingly. So instead of counting sheep. You redesigned a house. Cole shrugged. I've always been weird. Everyone laughed. Rebecca looked back at the plans. You'd really do all this? Cole nodded. I told you. I like seeing good people get a second chance. Rebecca looked at him for several seconds. No one had ever invested this much effort in one of her dreams. Quietly she said. Thank you. Cole simply smiled. You can thank me after the roof doesn't leak. That evening, as everyone packed up to leave, Rebecca's phone rang. Scott. She stared at the screen. Ashley noticed. You don't have to answer. Rebecca hesitated. Then accepted the call. Hello. Scott sounded completely different. Gone was the confidence. Gone was the frustration. Only fear remained. Rebecca. I lost. She frowned. What do you mean? The bank. They won't refinance. I've tried everywhere. Rebecca remained silent. They're taking the house. The words hung in the air. I don't know what to do. Rebecca closed her eyes. For 16 years. That sentence had always been followed by the same expectation. She would fix it. She would work more. Send more money. Sacrifice more of herself. This time. She answered differently. I'm sorry you're going through that. Scott waited. So. That's it? Rebecca took a slow breath. Yes. I truly hope you figure it out. She ended the call. No anger. No revenge. No satisfaction. Just peace. Cole quietly looked at her. You okay? Rebecca slipped the phone into her pocket. For the first time in years. I think I finally am. As the sun disappeared behind the mountains, none of them noticed a luxury SUV turning onto the dirt road. An elderly man stepped out, looked across Rebecca's property for several moments, and smiled. Then he quietly said to himself. I've finally found her. None of them knew who he was. Or how dramatically he was about to change Rebecca's future. The luxury SUV came to a stop beside the entrance to the property. Everyone turned. An elderly man stepped out slowly, straightening the sleeves of his linen shirt before looking around the land with genuine admiration. He appeared to be in his early 70s. His silver hair was neatly combed, and despite his age, he carried himself with quiet confidence. Rebecca walked toward him. "Can I help you?" The man smiled warmly. "I certainly hope so." He extended his hand. "My name is Harold Whitmore." Rebecca shook it politely. "Rebecca Morgan." Harold nodded. "I know." Rebecca frowned. "I'm sorry, have we met before?" "Not officially." That answer immediately caught everyone's attention. Ashley and Tyler exchanged uncertain glances. Harold looked around at the property before continuing. "I've actually been trying to find you for almost 3 weeks." Rebecca blinked. "Me?" "Yes." He reached into his SUV and removed a leather portfolio. Inside were several documents. "I own Whitmore Custom Homes." Cole's eyebrows immediately lifted. "You own Whitmore?" Harold looked at him and smiled. "I do." Cole let out a quiet whistle. Rebecca looked confused. "I'm afraid I don't understand." Cole leaned toward her. "Whitmore Custom Homes builds some of the nicest houses in southern Nevada." Rebecca looked back at Harold. "And, you're looking for me?" Harold nodded. "A few months ago, I visited the Sunrise Grand Hotel." Rebecca's expression changed. "That's where I worked." "I know. I wasn't staying there. I was meeting with the management team." He smiled. "I accidentally dropped my wallet in the lobby." Rebecca searched her memory. Then suddenly, "I remember." Harold nodded. "You found it." She smiled. "It wasn't a big deal." "It was to me." Harold laughed softly. "It contained nearly $12,000 in cash." Tyler's eyes widened. "12,000?" Harold nodded. "My company had just purchased equipment from a private seller who only accepted cash." Rebecca looked surprised. "I never opened it." "I know. The security cameras showed everything. You immediately turned it in." Harold paused. "Most people would have looked inside." "You didn't." Rebecca shrugged. "It wasn't mine." Harold smiled. "Exactly." He opened the portfolio. "I asked the hotel manager who you were. They told me about you. 16 years. 2 jobs. Never missed a shift. Always helping everyone else." Rebecca looked uncomfortable. "I was just doing my job." Harold nodded. "And that's why I wanted to meet you." He handed her a business card. "I'd like to offer you something." Rebecca accepted it carefully. "What kind of offer?" Harold looked across the property. "I heard you're planning to build." Rebecca smiled. "I am." Harold glanced toward Cole. "You've chosen a good builder." Cole nodded respectfully. "Thank you, sir." Harold looked back at Rebecca. "My company donates 1 custom-built home every year." Everyone fell silent. Rebecca stared at him. "I'm sorry." "What?" Harold continued. "We call it the Legacy Project. We choose someone whose character deserves to be recognized." Rebecca shook her head. "I think you've got the wrong person." Harold smiled. "No. I don't. You returned something that could have changed your own life. You expected nothing in return." Rebecca looked down. "I just did what anyone should do." Harold chuckled. "If only that were true." He handed her another folder. "I'd like Whitmore Custom Homes to provide all architectural design services at no cost." Rebecca's eyes widened. "And?" He smiled again. "I'll personally cover the cost of your foundation." Silence. Ashley looked at Tyler. Tyler looked at Cole. No one spoke. Rebecca finally found her voice. "I can't accept that." Why not? Because I didn't earn it. Harold smiled kindly. Rebecca. Kindness doesn't create debt. It creates opportunity. She still hesitated. I've never accepted charity. Harold shook his head. This isn't charity. It's gratitude. Cole folded his arms. I'd listen to him. Harold laughed. I like this young man. Rebecca stood quietly for several moments. Finally she asked. Why me? Harold looked toward the mountains. When I lost my wife 12 years ago, I stopped believing there were many truly honest people left. He smiled gently. Then a hotel housekeeper returned a wallet that could have paid for a new life. You reminded me that integrity still exists. Rebecca's eyes filled with tears. For years, she had believed no one noticed her sacrifices. No one saw the long hours. The overtime. The lonely nights. The endless work. Yet somehow, a stranger had. Harold extended his hand once more. So, what do you say? Rebecca slowly shook it. I'd be honored. Harold smiled broadly. Excellent. He looked toward Cole. I hear you're handling construction. Cole nodded. If Rebecca still wants me. Harold laughed. Good. I don't interfere with builders who already care. Then he turned back to Rebecca. I'll have my architects here Monday morning. Before anyone could say another word, Tyler quietly stepped beside his mother. You know something? Rebecca looked at him. For the first time. I think life is finally paying you back. Rebecca smiled. I don't need life to pay me back. She looked around at her children. At the empty land. At the future slowly taking shape. I already have everything I was missing. But she had no idea that the biggest surprise wasn't the free foundation. Or the architectural plans. It was waiting inside Harold's portfolio. A surprise he intended to reveal the very next morning. Rebecca barely slept that night. She lay awake in her hotel room replaying everything that had happened over the past week. 7 days earlier, she'd arrived in Las Vegas believing she was finally coming home. Instead, she'd found another woman living in her house. She'd lost the life she'd spent 16 years building. Or so she'd thought. Now, for the first time in a very long while, she realized she hadn't lost everything. She had simply been forced to start over. And maybe starting over wasn't the punishment she'd believed it to be. The next morning, Rebecca arrived at her property just after 8. Cole was already there, unloading equipment from his trailer. You beat me. Rebecca smiled. I couldn't sleep. Cole laughed. That's usually a sign somebody's building a house. Before she could answer, another convoy of vehicles appeared on the dirt road. 3 white pickup trucks. 2 SUVs. 1 large trailer carrying surveying equipment. The logo on every vehicle read. Whitmore Custom Homes. Harold stepped out first. Behind him came 2 architects, an engineer, and several project managers. Cole gave a low whistle. I guess he wasn't joking. Harold walked over with the same warm smile. Good morning, Rebecca. Good morning. He handed her a large blue folder. I brought something. Rebecca opened it. Inside were professionally drawn renderings of a beautiful single-story ranch-style home. Large front porch. Open kitchen. Stone fireplace. Wide windows overlooking the mountains. A workshop behind the garage. A wraparound patio. Rebecca stared silently. It's beautiful. Harold smiled. It can still be changed. You'll decide everything. Ashley looked over her mother's shoulder. Oh, Mom. It's gorgeous. Tyler smiled. You finally get the front porch you've always talked about. Rebecca laughed softly. I never thought anyone actually remembered that. We remember more than you think. Ashley answered. Harold motioned everyone closer. I'd like to explain something. The group gathered around. My company doesn't simply build houses. We build homes people can grow old in. He pointed to the plans. Wider hallways. No unnecessary stairs. Energy-efficient construction. Low maintenance. Rebecca listened carefully. Then Harold reached into his briefcase one more time. I also promised you a surprise. He placed another envelope into her hands. She slowly opened it. Inside was a single sheet of paper. She frowned. Then looked up. I don't understand. Harold smiled. The 5 acres next to yours belong to me. Everyone looked surprised. I've decided to sell them. Rebecca nodded politely. I'm sure they'll make someone very happy. Harold chuckled. They already have. Rebecca looked confused. He slid another document toward her. This is the deed. Rebecca stared at him. My attorney prepared it yesterday. The land is yours. Complete silence. Ashley covered her mouth. Tyler blinked several times. Even Cole looked speechless. Rebecca slowly shook her head. No. I can't accept this. Harold folded his hands. Why? Because it's too much. It isn't. It is. Harold smiled gently. Rebecca. I have 3 children. They're all successful. They've built wonderful lives. They don't need another piece of land. He looked across the empty desert. But this property belongs beside yours. Rebecca felt tears filling her eyes. I don't even know how to thank you. You already did. When you returned my wallet. She laughed through tears. That wallet keeps getting more expensive. Everyone laughed. Harold smiled. The value was never the money. It was the reminder that people like you still exist. The surveyors immediately began measuring the additional acreage. Cole looked at the updated map and smiled. Well. This changes everything. Rebecca looked at him. Good changes? The best kind. He pointed toward the expanded property. We can move the workshop farther back. You'll have room for fruit trees. A greenhouse. Maybe even a guest cottage someday. Ashley grinned. So I can visit. Rebecca raised an eyebrow playfully. If you promise not to cancel at the last minute. Ashley laughed. I deserve that. Tyler smiled. So do I. Around lunchtime everyone gathered beneath a temporary canopy for sandwiches. Conversation flowed easily. For the first time in years, Rebecca looked around a table where nobody argued. Nobody asked for money. Nobody expected anything from her. They simply enjoyed being together. Harold quietly watched from the end of the table. Cole noticed. What? Harold smiled. I've built over 400 houses. And? I've learned something. What? The strongest foundations aren't poured with concrete. They're built with forgiveness. Rebecca overheard the sentence. She looked toward Ashley. Toward Tyler. Neither of them had been perfect. Neither had she. But somehow, they had found their way back to each other. That evening, just before everyone left, Rebecca's phone buzzed again. Scott. She hesitated. Then answered. His voice sounded completely defeated. Rebecca. The bank gave me a date. She remained silent. We have 60 days before they auction the house. Rebecca closed her eyes. The house that had once represented every dream she'd ever had would soon belong to strangers. I thought you should know. He whispered. For several seconds neither of them spoke. Finally Rebecca answered quietly. I hope you find peace, Scott. Then she ended the call. She didn't feel victorious. She didn't feel angry. She simply felt free. As she slipped the phone back into her pocket, Cole walked over beside her. Without saying anything, they both looked toward the mountains as the sun slowly disappeared behind the desert horizon. A brand new foundation was about to be poured. And for the first time in 16 years, Rebecca realized it wasn't just her future that was being rebuilt. It was her life. 3 weeks later, the first concrete truck rolled onto Rebecca's property just after sunrise. She stood quietly beside Cole, holding a cup of coffee with both hands. Neither of them spoke. There was no need. The sound of workers preparing the forms, checking measurements, and directing the trucks filled the cool morning air. Cole smiled. "Ready?" Rebecca nodded. "I've been ready for 16 years." The first load of concrete slowly poured into the foundation forms. Rebecca felt tears gathering in her eyes. For years she had watched other people build their dreams. Hotel guests celebrating new homes. Families moving into beautiful neighborhoods. She had cleaned their rooms. Made their beds. Picked up after their vacations. All while believing her own dream would have to wait. Now, it was finally becoming real. By noon, Ashley, Tyler, and Megan had arrived. Ashley carried a large box. "I brought lunch." Tyler laughed. "You've become the official food supplier. Someone has to make sure you don't survive on gas station burritos." Cole raised his hand. "I fully support this decision." Everyone laughed. Megan walked over to Rebecca. "Close your eyes." Rebecca looked confused. "What?" "Just trust me." Rebecca smiled and closed them. A second later she felt something soft placed into her hands. She looked down. It was a tiny pair of baby boots. Brown leather. Barely larger than her palm. Megan smiled. "We found out yesterday." Rebecca looked up. "Found out what?" Tyler wrapped an arm around his wife. "We're having a boy." Rebecca's eyes immediately filled with tears. "A boy?" Megan nodded. "And?" Tyler smiled. "We've already chosen his name." Rebecca looked between them. "What is it?" Tyler swallowed. "If it's okay with you. We'd like to name him Benjamin." Rebecca smiled politely. "That's a beautiful name." Tyler shook his head. "It's your father's name." Rebecca froze. Her own father. Benjamin Carter. He had passed away nearly 20 years earlier. He had been the man who taught her honesty. Hard work. Keeping promises. Tyler smiled nervously. "I never told you. But Grandpa was always my hero." Rebecca couldn't hold back her tears. She hugged both of them tightly. "I think he'd be proud." Later that afternoon, while everyone admired the freshly poured foundation, Harold arrived once again. This time he wasn't wearing a business suit. He wore jeans, work boots, and a baseball cap. Cole laughed. "I didn't know millionaires owned work clothes." Harold grinned. "My wife would have been disappointed if I didn't." Rebecca smiled. "I wish I could have met her." Harold looked toward the mountains. "You would have liked Eleanor. She believed people should leave every place better than they found it." He paused. "She would have loved what you're building here." Rebecca nodded quietly. "I'll try to honor that." Harold looked around. "I think you already are." As the afternoon faded into evening, a familiar pickup slowly approached the property. Everyone noticed it. Scott. He climbed out alone. No Nicole. No anger. No confidence. Just a man who looked 10 years older than he had a month earlier. Tyler instinctively stepped beside his mother. Ashley folded her arms. Scott stopped several feet away. "I know I'm probably the last person anyone wants to see." No one answered. He looked at Rebecca. "I don't need anything. I just wanted to say something." Rebecca waited. Scott took a slow breath. "I drove past here yesterday. I saw the foundation." He looked around the property. "It's beautiful." Rebecca remained silent. Scott nodded slowly. You finally built something that belongs to you. Another long pause followed. I spent years blaming everyone else. My job. My stress. The bills. The distance. But the truth is. He looked directly at Rebecca. I destroyed my own family. Ashley quietly wiped away a tear. Tyler looked at the ground. Scott continued. I kept telling myself I'd fix everything later. But later never came. Rebecca listened without interrupting. I don't expect forgiveness. I don't expect another chance. I just wanted you to hear one thing. He swallowed hard. I'm sorry. I should have protected the life we built together. I should have protected you. The desert fell completely silent. Even the construction crew had stopped working. Rebecca slowly stepped forward. Scott looked at her with uncertainty. She smiled gently. I forgave you a long time ago. Scott blinked. You did? Rebecca nodded. Forgiveness doesn't erase what happened. It simply means I'm no longer carrying it. Scott lowered his head. For the first time in decades. He cried. Not loudly. Not dramatically. Just quietly. Like a man finally accepting the weight of his own choices. After several moments he wiped his eyes. I hope you're happy. Rebecca looked toward the new foundation. Then toward her children. Toward Megan. Toward Harold. Toward Cole. Finally she answered. I think I'm finally learning how. Scott smiled sadly. I always hoped you'd find your way home. Rebecca looked around her property. I did. Scott nodded once. Then quietly returned to his truck. This time. No one tried to stop him. Because everyone understood. Some chapters don't end with reconciliation. They end with acceptance. As Scott disappeared down the dusty road, Cole quietly stood beside Rebecca. You okay? Rebecca smiled. Better than okay. She looked at the foundation one more time. This is the first home I've ever built. Without sacrificing myself to build it. Cole smiled. And that's exactly why it'll be your strongest one. 6 months later. The sun rose slowly over the Nevada desert, casting long golden rays across Rebecca's property. The house was finished. Natural stone lined the front porch. Large windows reflected the mountains. Fresh desert landscaping surrounded the driveway. Young mesquite trees swayed gently in the morning breeze. The wraparound porch Rebecca had dreamed about for nearly 2 decades stretched across the front of the house exactly as she'd imagined. Maybe even better. She stood quietly with a mug of coffee in her hands. This time. She wasn't looking through someone else's window. She was standing on her own porch. Home. The smell of bacon drifted through the open kitchen windows. Inside, Ashley was setting the dining table. Tyler stood outside near the grill with Cole, pretending they knew what they were doing while Harold laughed from a nearby rocking chair. Megan walked carefully onto the porch carrying a tiny bundle wrapped in a blue blanket. Rebecca smiled instantly. My favorite little man is awake. Megan carefully placed the baby into her arms. Someone's been waiting to see Grandma all morning. Rebecca looked down. Benjamin blinked up at her with sleepy blue eyes. He wrapped his tiny fingers around hers. Rebecca felt tears forming once again. Only these tears were different. They weren't born from loneliness. Or disappointment. Or sacrifice. They came from gratitude. Tyler stepped onto the porch. Mom. Rebecca looked up. I've been thinking. She smiled. That usually gets expensive. Everyone laughed. Tyler rubbed the back of his neck. I spent years believing success meant owning a bigger business. He looked around the property. But now, I think success is knowing where people want to come for Sunday dinner. Rebecca looked toward the dining table. Ashley arranging flowers. Cole carrying another tray of food. Harold teasing Megan about spoiling the baby. Laughter echoed through the house. She smiled. I couldn't agree more. After breakfast, Harold stood and gently tapped his coffee mug with a spoon. I'd like everyone's attention for just a minute. The conversations faded. Harold looked at Rebecca. The first time I met this woman. She had no idea who I was. She could have kept my wallet. Nobody would have known. But she returned it anyway. He paused. At the time, I thought I was rewarding honesty. He smiled warmly. I've realized I was wrong. Everyone listened. I wasn't rewarding honesty. I was investing in someone who never stopped investing in other people. Harold reached into his jacket pocket. He pulled out a small wooden box. Rebecca looked puzzled. Harold. What is this? He handed it to her. Open it. Inside was a simple silver key. Rebecca looked confused. What does it open? Harold smiled. My retirement. The entire porch fell silent. I've decided to step away from Whitmore Custom Homes. Rebecca blinked. I'm happy for you. Harold laughed. You interrupted me. Everyone smiled. I've also decided that every year, my foundation will build one home for a family in need. Rebecca nodded. That's wonderful. It is. Harold replied. And I'd like you to lead the program. Rebecca stared at him. What? You know exactly what it feels like to spend your life putting everyone else first. You know what sacrifice looks like. You know what kindness looks like. He smiled. I can't think of anyone I'd trust more. Rebecca was speechless. I don't have experience running a charity. Harold chuckled. Neither did I. The only qualification that truly matters is caring. Ashley quietly whispered. Mom. You were made for this. Tyler nodded. So was Grandpa. Rebecca looked at the little silver key resting in the box. Then back at Harold. Tears filled her eyes once again. I'd be honored. Harold smiled. I knew you would. That afternoon, after everyone had gone inside, Rebecca remained alone on the porch. Cole walked over carrying 2 glasses of iced tea. He handed her one. You've got quite a view. Rebecca looked across the desert. The mountains glowed beneath the afternoon sun. It still doesn't feel real. Cole leaned against the porch railing. You know, I've built houses for almost 30 years. Rebecca smiled. And? I've learned something. What? The happiest people aren't the ones with the biggest homes. They're the ones who finally stop living for everyone else's expectations. Rebecca looked at him. You always know the right thing to say. Cole laughed. No. I just say enough things that eventually one of them sounds smart. She laughed. A real laugh. The kind that came easily now. After a comfortable silence, Cole looked at her. So. Any regrets? Rebecca thought for a long moment. Then she slowly shook her head. I used to regret giving so much of myself away. She looked through the open front door where her family laughed together. But if I hadn't lived through all of that, I would have never appreciated this. Cole nodded. I figured you'd say something like that. As evening settled over the desert, everyone gathered on the front porch to watch the sunset. Benjamin slept peacefully in Rebecca's arms. Ashley rested her head on her mother's shoulder. Tyler stood beside Megan, one arm around his wife. Harold smiled quietly from his rocking chair. Cole leaned against the porch railing, watching the sky turn shades of orange, pink, and deep purple. Rebecca looked at the people surrounding her. Not the family she had imagined 16 years ago. But the family she had now. Stronger. More honest. More grateful. She finally understood something she had spent half her life searching for. Home was never a particular house. It was never a mortgage. It was never a title deed. Home was the place where you were valued not for what you could provide, but simply because you were there. She smiled as Benjamin squeezed her finger in his tiny hand. The desert breeze drifted across the porch. The laughter behind her filled the evening air. And for the first time in many years, Rebecca Morgan wasn't dreaming about coming home. She was already there.